Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain, Randy Wright speaking, and as always, I'm joined on our state-of-the-art radio program by my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seat belts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while Jeremy and I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before we may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, what we see unfurling before our very eyes there on the convention floor in Cleveland, Ohio, is nothing short of an attempt by the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, what is referred to in the common vernacular as the so-called establishment wing of the Republican Party, is trying to make a complete mockery of our electoral system here in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. We here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have oft-times attempted to warn on previous episodes just how much of a fiasco and disaster a presumptive Donald J. Trump candidacy and nomination would be for the conservative movement. We have oft-times stated that he is the modern era's version of the Hoover administration. Remember that Herbert Hoover was touted as a conservative, even though he had never once truly held conservative principles in his life. And when the Great Depression hit with the October surprise of the Wall Street crash, it was used as an attempt to sweep conservatism underground for decades. It wasn't until 1964 that the conservative movement came back to the surface, and even then, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media tried to paint the defeat of Barry Goldwater as the death knell, again, for the conservative movement once and for all, forevermore. However, it didn't quite work out that way. In 1976, we know that Ronald Reagan challenged Gerald Ford for the presidency. Yes, it was another loss, but it paved the way for 1980. And what we are witnessing here at the Republican National Convention, there in Cleveland, Ohio, is a 40-year cyclical repeat. And the reason that I can say that with such confidence as I sit here and speak into this microphone is because when you look at the current state of affairs and the way that the party is doing everything in its power to crush and to demoralize the conservative wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, it is exactly the same as what we saw in 1976. Now, sure, there will be some in the commensurate and the punditry, particularly those like Rush Limbaugh, who are going to try and say that this is totally different, and that Cruz just needs to stand there and endorse the quaff waffler, the mafioso quaffioso. He even went so far as to say today, Jeremy, on his program, that Reagan actually endorsed Ford during the 1976 convention. I don't remember that being a part of the speech. I don't remember that being a part of what was shared at that time. Again, this is revisionist history, but this time it's being done by those on the right. And for what purpose? For what good is it going to do to keep lying like that? That sort of lie is what disenfranchises the American people. It works against our system of polity, and it really does drive a wedge into the base, hopelessly dividing us before this looming election that is slated for November. And of course, we know that the Lion Branch Trumpidians are already out in force trying to blame true constitutional compositionists for the failings of their candidate, the one that they so ruthlessly tried to shove and cram down our throat. Speaking of ruthlessness, we know that they were out on the floor attempting to intimidate and hurling death threats at Never Trump delegates, like one from Utah. They surrounded her at the bathroom and said that they were going to kill her. This has got to come to a swift and immediate end. We need to take our party back from these thugs. And it's not just about the party. It's about the principles that make America great. You know, America never ceased being great, but Trump is damn sure trying to make that the case.
You know, it's revisionist history from the right side of the aisle that is actually perceived to be that belonging to the right side of the aisle, but it's nothing more, again, a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's all it is. It is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Again, folks, we've mentioned it umpteen times on previous episodes. This is the agenda of not only the Fabians, but the Fabian lights and the Trump lights. Okay? They want to hide their agenda right up in plain sight and then mask it with everything else, call it things like unity, calling it things like making America great again, calling it things like building a wall, so on and so forth. But yet the true agenda, the true auspice of this is complete and total chaos and disruption and mayhem of our electoral process, thus being used to subjugate people into forfeiting their obligations and duties that is bestowed to them upon, from our Constitution. This is forced forfeiture in its finest art form, is what it is. You corrupt the majority of the electoral process by duping everybody into doing this. Then everybody becomes complacent and toes the line with that. They start ignoring and abandoning their principles. We've already seen many of people abandon their principles. People, Randy, that you and I have once held in high regard and esteem. Individuals that we know that have actually donned the uniform of a military serviceman of the United States, who's taken an oath to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution, and yet has now tarnished that oath forever, and it will never shine as bright as it once did. In fact, I don't think it'll ever shine again, because they've abandoned their principles to support an individual and a messianic figure, an agenda to destroy that which they took an oath to support. It's sickening.
Well, yes, it is sickening. And a lot of what it comes down to is there is this blind anger at the fact that the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, has been ignoring the will of the base of the party for far too long now. It's one of the reasons why we have so oft times referred to the mafioso quafioso as the Pied Piper of disillusioned conservatives on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. But it goes deeper than that. There is something deeper than that. These people have essentially given up all hope. They're projecting their own identity, their own hopes, dreams, and aspirations onto a political candidate. You shouldn't do that, because it tarnishes your self-worth, it tarnishes your self-importance, and above all, it denies you your own self-identity. You see, what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, who are hell-bent on the utter annihilation of the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people, are trying to achieve is this idea of destroying a sense of identity in the United States. That is what they have been working so meticulously towards for the past century and a half now. And look at the great amount of success that they've had. When you see the platform of Donald Trump, first of all, the thing that just pops up immediately into my mind is that he has no meaningful policy positions. But more than that, we already know that he's gone before the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media back in 2012 and said that he has not once read the Constitution from cover to cover because he found no inherent nor any intrinsic value in doing so. Yet this is a man that is seeking the highest office in the land, a man who is going to have to swear an oath to uphold and defend the United States Constitution from all enemies, whether they be foreign or domestic. We can't trust this man to do any of that, when he has already gone onto the record at saying that he will violate the Constitution, that he will continue the extra-constitutional use and abuse of executive order powers like that of Obama. We see that he has this totalitarian thread in him, this authoritarianism within him, and I've heard so many of the Lion Branch Trumpidians come out and say that that's just necessary to be a good and decent businessman. No, it's not. There is a difference between just running a business to trample all over your partners and to make an illicit windfall profit in that way, and running your business in a moral and ethical fashion. What has happened to morality in this country? Well, we see that the twin doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism have been brought to the forefront by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, their allies in the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and also in the academicians who infest our institutions of education and higher learning from coast to coast and border to border. And for 150 plus years now, they have been trying to irreparably and fundamentally transform the United States of America away from that of being a constitutionally endowed representative republic to some sort of Fabian socialist dystopia. And unless and until we start to really examine this and start to get to the bottom of it and admit who the real threat and danger is here, we are going to struggle overcoming this. We are just going to witness this death spiral that is plaguing this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours not only continue unabated, but to accelerate at an exponential rate.
Again, history is repeating itself. Let's look at 2008. John McCain. Now, everybody rallied around John McCain. Say, hey, well, if you don't vote for Kane, if you don't vote for McCain and you don't support him, we have to support him, or else Obama's going to get elected. Obama is worse than McCain. It's that lesser of two evils mantra. And here's the thing: when you allow evil into your lives in incremental doses, John McCain was a small increment. Then we have Mitt Romney, which was just a little bit larger increment. Now we have Donald Trump, who's a little bit larger than both of them too. The pattern is the evil, by incrementalization, builds and builds and grows to where it becomes so enormous and so big that before it engulfs everything before it's too late. Okay, it's like a groundswell. Okay, and that's what's happened. And it's not just with McCain. It was with Bush, George W. Bush. It was with
Bob
Dole, George H.W. Bush,
Ford,
not with Ford,
Nixon,
and you just keep going back and back and back, and
all the way to Herbert Hoover.
All the way to Herbert Hoover. See, it's that incrementalization of evil, little bit by little bit, growing and growing each election cycle.
In fact, you could say that the vast majority of the Republican presidents that we've had were not that great. Look, Warren Harding was not a good president. Calvin Coolidge was the rare exception. Calvin Coolidge was the gem that shined during that time period. But he was followed by Herbert Hoover. The next Republican president really to come up through the fray after that was Eisenhower. Now, Eisenhower was basically a Democrat in Republican clothing. Then we had Nixon. Nixon was just despicable. And then after Nixon, we had Ford, and then finally Reagan. But you see, of the choices that were there, of the Republican presidents for the vast majority of the 20th century, let's even go back further. Theodore Roosevelt? Seriously?
Abraham Lincoln.
Taft?
Abraham Lincoln.
Yes. We see that the vast majority of the Republican presidents that have held that office have not been true conservatives. They have not been strict adherents to the Constitution. The rare exceptions were Calvin Coolidge and Ronald Reagan in his first term. Ted Cruz was the first constitutionalist, first true dyed-in-the-wool constitutionalist that we had seen step up center stage in a long time. In a very long time.
I would actually say that Ted Cruz was more of a constitutionalist than Calvin Coolidge.
Yes.
Truth be told. In fact, Ted Cruz
is just because Ted Cruz is more trained in it. than Calvin Coolidge was. Calvin Coolidge, given his humble upbringing, was exceptional. He was one of those prodigy-type candidates, prodigy-type presidents, because he learned it on his own. He didn't have formal education in it, so to speak. But he understood that there was an inherent problem with relying too much on governmental power and authority. And that is something that has been wiped away from the public consciousness. Too many people are looking for, as you mentioned, a messianic figure to come and save them, instead of realizing that by turning to anyone else other than ourselves in our capacity as popular sovereigns is turning our back on the very type of system that was designed by our founding fathers at the inception of this country over 235 years ago. So unless and until we begin to actually acknowledge that that was part of the problem, and that we have to be more proactive in the maintenance and safeguarding of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, they are going to continue to step up their efforts. Because as far as I'm concerned, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists see a light at the end of the tunnel, and they think that their goal, which, as I've mentioned, they've been working for so meticulously these past 150 plus years, is within grasp. They think that they can come out of the woodwork now, that they don't even have to hide the fact of who they are, that their identity can come out into the open. How else could a frothing at the mouth, self-avowed socialist like Vermont Senator Nerdface Boy May Sanders come forth and do as well as he did? Now, I'm sure that the frothing at the mouth Fabians are going to sit there and say, but he still lost, Randy. But isn't it just speaking volumes about the state of affairs in this country that his candidacy was even allowed to come to fruition, that he wasn't laughed off of the national stage?
Or as Trump would have preferred, carted off on a gurney or a stretcher.
Well, not Bernie. Remember that Trump even confused his own candidacy with that of Bernie Sanders.
Right, but what I'm saying is, to use Trump's vernacular there, it would have been justified for Bernie Sanders to be carried off on a stretcher, because for the fact of he's a socialist. He's completely diametrically opposed to every single fundamental tenet rooted in natural law that this country stands for.
Yes.
And it's the same with Hillary, to be sure.
And it's the same with Trump.
Yes.
This Republican National Convention has exposed just how departed from the natural law tenets that the gutless opposition party, or GOP, has really become. They don't hold the Constitution with any value. They don't care about the vote. And then what's so amazing is you hear the Lion Branch Trumpidians just scramble all over the place, whining and complaining, saying that those who were trying to unseat Trump were not speaking for the will of the people, that they were trying to resist the will of the people. Yet when they sit there and deny the voice of those delegates who were selected in their state primary and caucus processes for other candidates, it really speaks volumes that they don't care about it. It's hypocrisy, sheer unadulterated hypocrisy. And then last night, when they were doing the roll call, they gave all of Washington, D.C.'s delegates to Trump. That's not the way it was elected. They gave all of Iowa's delegates to Trump. I don't remember that being the spread from the primaries. They gave Trump almost all of Texas's delegates, too. I certainly don't remember Donald J. Trump winning the state of Texas during the primary process. This is the sort of laughable situation that we face. It is unspeakably ruthless what Trump is doing, but more so than that, it is illegal. It goes against the very heart of what our representative Republican form of government is all about. And yet these Lion Branch Trumpidians have the gall to go out and say that it is we, those who have vowed never to support the mafioso quafioso, that are ignoring the will of the people or going against the will of the people. I have a news flash for you, you Lion Trump hair suckers. He never once gained a full majority. There were more people against Trump than were ever for him. And by the way, that is a trend that is not going to change. That trend is going to double down, I can assure you.
Wait a second, Randy. something like that happened at the roll call vote, or this whole convention period, doesn't that take away from the whole foundational auspice of the 12th Amendment of the Constitution?
Yes, it does.
Amazing. So again, now we see yet another part of the Constitution that is being eroded away and destroyed, which is their whole agenda to begin with. They want to sit there and cry foul. Oh, it was voter fraud in these states, and these people showed up, it was intimidation, and blah, blah. We didn't get the votes that we should have gotten. We didn't get the delegates during the primaries. And now at the conventions, they are doing the exact same thing. Again, creating the problem, swooping in and utilizing that problem for their own gain and benefit by giving the perception to the people that they are fixing it and solving that problem.
Yes.
Propaganda 101. That is exactly what they're doing. And I guarantee you, you can look to, let's see, the Enabling Act speech of 1933 from Adolf Hitler, one that Trump has actually kept at his bedside and read repeatedly on how to do that. He did it in the business world and on the business end of things, and now he's taking that and using those tactics in the election cycle to disparage the people. Again, he never saw any value in the Constitution, and therefore he sees no value in the people, because the Constitution is an extension of the people. Why? Because we, the people, ordained it.
Yeah, it's going back right to the opening lines to the preamble to the United States Constitution itself. And that's the thing with Trump. Everybody seems to sit there and be enamored by Trump, to think that he's this somehow larger-than-life persona and personality. But that's not what I see. I see a very shallow, hollow man who has only been interested in his own self-aggrandizement. Yes, he is a great marketeer. He is a great con artist. And, the whole term of con man or con artist, it comes from the term confidence. He wins the confidence of the people, and then he destroys them, just as he did in all of his business ventures, just as he has done for the vast majority of his 70 years on God's green earth. And the fact that people are struggling to see that just baffles me, Jeremy. I can't understand why they are refusing to open their eyes to the truth, because the truth is what will set us free, as Scripture says. But you see, it's this sort of divisiveness that we are seeing that's just creeping into the body politique of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours that is just getting worse. It is getting incrementally worse in election cycle after election cycle. And I believe that the ultimate reason why that pattern is continuing unchecked is because when we buy into that erroneous notion of you have to vote for the lesser of two evils, you are essentially giving a green light to those who keep propping up these terrible candidates each and every time. And then the system gets rigged. That's why Rinse and Repeatus was trying to block the rules vote to have it to where the open primaries were shut. We know that there were Lion Branch Trumpidian delegates trying to grab signatures away from the various state delegates that would have given them enough to have the roll call vote to try and destroy them. They were doing this, again, to try and delay. It was a delaying tactic, so that they could put forth their attempt that they finally pulled off last night of rigging the electoral votes for whether the candidate received the 1237 delegates that was necessary to secure the nomination on the first ballot. See, they were trying to prevent it from ever being able to go to a contested convention. But in so doing, they have not destroyed the Never Trump movement, as Paul Manafort, who has all sorts of Russian mob connections, tried to say in front of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. No, instead they have galvanized us. They have shown us just how corrupt the so-called establishment wing, what I like to refer to as the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, really is. And see, folks, that is what we have been trying to warn you about, dating back to our premiere episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015. We are here trying to empower you so that these sorts of charlatans cannot just sit there and control your life. Because it's as Alexis de Tocqueville said, that anyone who supports any form or flavor of socialism is in fact just a new age feudalist, meaning that they want to control the facets of our daily lives from cradle until grave. That is the last thing that we would ever want to see here, because it's diametrically opposed to the foundational image for this country that our founding fathers had at its inception 235 years ago.
Let's make another correlation here. You talked about a little bit of scripture. The truth shall set you free. And this is what they don't understand. Truth is an absolute. Okay? And to take something from Glenn Beck and see what Glenn Beck has always said, truth has no agenda. Okay?
Right.
Okay, it's an absolute. There's no gray area. It just is. It's there. You can't refute it. It will always come through. It can't be destroyed. Okay? Now, with truth being an absolute, we're going to use that as absolutism. Okay? Now, absolutism is basically strict adherence to the Constitution, the burning desire and spirit of what made this country great to begin with, which still makes this country great. Deep down inside, everybody, regardless if they support Trump or not, everybody still has a little burning ember of that in them. Okay? Now, absolutism is being washed away by populism. That's exactly what's happening with this. This is populism at its peak.
I'm going to step in here. Absolutism, as it traditionally meant, was absolute control in one person, the king. What you are speaking of is republicanism.
Well, I'm looking at absolutism as strict control within one person, and I'm tying that and making the correlation directly with individualism.
So sovereignty is what you're speaking to.
Correct. Which also could be viewed as a person, again, kings were also known as sovereigns.
Sure.
So it's sovereignty in the way that our founding fathers brought it to light. It's absolutism in the way that our founding fathers brought it to light with pertaining to the individual.
Right. So it's individualism. The reason I say that what I do is because absolutism itself has a very negative connotation. Sure. And I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Well, and the thing is, and again, this is part of how we empower our listeners and how we empower we the people. I'm a firm believer in taking things that are negative, have a negative connotation, and using them to my advantage, and using them to the advantage to achieve a better goal or a greater good. Okay? And, and just to go off on a little bit of a tangent, you and I have talked about this with, all these individuals that talk about, empowering yourself and surrounding yourself with positive people all the time and pushing away the negativity. See, that's in a sense a certain form of defeatism, because if you always surround yourself with positive individuals, you never get the negative aspects of things, and therefore you can never take the negativity and turn it around and make it work for you.
Right. But we don't mean it in tyranny or despotism.
No, it's strict individualism.
Right. And you see, that's the problem. There's so many that are pushing for a true traditional absolutism. That's what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists are wanting to achieve. And that's certainly what Donald J. Trump is trying to achieve as well. We've already heard him say on his Twitter feed time and again ad nauseum that he's the only one that can solve the problems that are currently facing the United States, as if one singular individual or entity could do so. Now, yes, with the way that the highest office in the land has been stripped away from the powers and authorities that are traditionally enumerated to it within the clear and concise language of our shared United States Constitution, that is far more powerful. That's why you have to have far more restraint, because the presidency has become something that it was never originally intended to be. You see, we have to get back to the natural law, the natural order of things. And I know that we've stated this on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, but the natural order of things starts with the family. The nuclear family is the beginning of the government. That is your first governmental order or body. And from there, it goes upwards. Our founding fathers wanted the governmental entities that are closest to the people to have the most power. That's because the people exert the most power and control over them. Again, it goes to that natural order of things that forms the bedrock foundation of not only our shared constitution, but also our representative republican form of government that allows us to be a free people. It comes from each and every one of us. That is why the opening line to the preamble to the United States Constitution says, "We the people are creating this government." Unfortunately, we have seen throughout the span of time it has incrementally gone further and further awry, further away from the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And what's so dubious and intellectually disingenuous about what the Trump camp is doing in this 2016 presidential election cycle, it's that he's trying to make it a populist movement. Populism in and of itself is destructive because it stands for nothing. It just stands for destruction. And you see already that the vast majority of the people that are calling for a tyranny of false unity under the Quaff banner are pushing for this type of unity behind him, not because of the positions he stands for, but because he's not Hillary Clinton. Look, in 2008, we voted against someone. In 2012, we voted against someone. Has that worked? Has that ever worked for us? Has that ever worked for any meaningful, practical, and useful political movement in our relatively brief yet illustrious history? I posit that it does not. That's why we are not in the second term of a President Romney. We're not in the second term of a President McCain. And that's why one of the most divisive presidents of all living memory, if not the most divisive president of all living memory, managed to have 2 terms.
And it has to point to the fact that people have seemed to have gotten away from their natural instinct as well. It's human instinct to want to defend yourself and your family. It's like they've gotten away from that because they've allowed themselves to become complacent. They've allowed themselves to abandon their principles and place all the responsibility and efforts into somebody else to be responsible for them, to do for them, to save them. This has been a destructive force for the past 150, 160 years. And the longer we allow it to happen and the longer we allow it to continue, the more destructive it's going to get. It's kind of like, let's say, it's not pretty much a black hole, if you think about it. Eventually, the black hole consumes everything that it comes in contact with, or it gets pulled into its vortex, including itself.
Yeah. It's a type of political destruction.
It's
really what it is.
It's what it is. It's self-destroying.
Suicide. Yeah, it's suicide. It's political suicide. That is what the gutless opposition party, or GOP, is doing right now as we speak into our microphones. It is self-destructing. And for no good reason. No good reason other than these people are so corrupt that they loathe and despise Ted Cruz. And I even saw a piece, I believe it was in Red State, saying that the reason that they didn't want the closed primaries was this was an attempt to block Ted Cruz's presidential aspirations for the 2020 election. That they would rather go through the defeat of 2016 and allow the rules to continue fettered so that they could keep having their weak candidates, because that would allow the gravy train for the gutless opposition party and the detente wing thereof to continue unabated. And that is really what they do. They don't care about us. They certainly aren't adhering to their own party platform, and they damn sure are not adhering to the supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2 of our Constitution, what is commonly referred to as the Supremacy Clause, is none other than the Constitution itself. But then, when you have people like Rush Limbaugh sitting there saying that we're going to have major problems if Cruz doesn't endorse Trump, why? Why would anyone expect Cruz to endorse Trump after Trump went through that mudslinging primary process, attacking the physical appearance of his wife? And now I already know that the Lion Branch Trumpidians are going to sit there and say that Cruz attacked Malaria, the Czech thumper, first. But no, he didn't. That was an independent political pack. And then I've already seen them say in response to that, well, he should have told them to. No, as per election laws, he's not allowed to. Unlike Trump, he actually follows the law. But what Trump did, that came directly out of Trump. And then we see that Malaria, the Czech thumper, was there plagiarizing a speech from none other than Muchi Obamnini. Now why? Why is that? Why is it that the Lion Branch Trumpidians sit there and try and say this is no big deal, that this is nothing to be concerned about, and it shows that Trump is a conservative? How does this show Trump is a conservative? How is this in line with conservatism? Quoting a speech that Muchi basically plagiarized from Saul Alinsky. We have to open our eyes to the truth. No, this isn't just reaching for straws to try and destroy Trump. I am literally, logically, practically here trying to figure out why Trump would support any of that. Why Trump then wouldn't fire the speechwriter for doing that. Yes, the speechwriter came forth to Trump and said, I didn't bet this, I didn't pay attention, and I allowed this to go forth. And Trump said, we all make mistakes, I got smally hands, I'm going to build a wall, I have perfect hair forever, I'm just that great, here, have 30 pieces of dandruff and go have some fun. You know, that just doesn't work. That doesn't work. Yes, it may come off as though he's being magnanimous, but it's not really magnanimity. It really is not. And the reason that it is not is because he is allowing mistakes that will tarnish the entire conservative movement to come to fruition. And that's the thing. He is allowing the two-dimensional, stereotypical caricatures that the left attempts to pigeonhole the right with come to fruition because he satisfies each and every one of them. Each and every one of them. And this doesn't concern anyone? In this highly politically correct, charged, and moral relativistically charged atmosphere? That is dangerous. It's frightening.
Well, I have a little bit of a pointy stick here that I'm going to burst a lot of people's bubble with when it comes to the whole Trump attacking Heidi Cruz and the perception that people took of Cruz attacking Malaria, the Czech thumper. Here's the thing. Heidi Cruz never put herself out there publicly as far as her emotion, her mental disorder of depression that she had a bout with. She never put that out there publicly. That was private. Malaria, the Czech thumper, the upchuck of a woodchuck Chuck thumper, decided that she's going to pose nude in a publication. It's called a publication because why? It's put out to the public. She made that choice to do that. She brought that on herself. See, all choices that we make have consequences, whether short-term or long-term. She wasn't thinking that far ahead. In fact, I don't think she can think any further than the tip of her plastic nose when it comes to a whole lot of things. I mean, for Farouk's sake, folks, even MTV put out this thing making fun of her and actually pointing it out. She plagiarized Rick Astley. You know, Rick rolled.
Mm-hmm.
Trump is never going to give up. He's never going to let you down. It is amazing that people, and here's the problem. I've seen on social media, oh, it was a great speech by her. She's going to make a great first lady. I heard people in online chat rooms saying, oh, FLOTUS to POTUS, blah, blah, blah. You know what? I don't want to hear it. How about flush? Because that's what's going to happen when these individuals decide that they want to, you know, wipe their hind ends with TP and throw everything in the toilet. It's just going to flush it all down. Because that's what they're doing. These individuals need to pull their heads out of their derrieres and realize you are the problem. You want to sit here and blame people like Randy and I and everybody else who is absolutely vehemently opposed to the Trump waffler. Mm-hmm. Because why? Oh, you don't understand. He's an outsider. No, it has nothing to do with him being an outsider. He's not an outsider. When he funds lobbyists and other politicians in order to grease their palms so that he can use them to stroke his own ego and acquire property through illegal eminent domain procurements, that doesn't make him an outsider. That makes him an inside trader. Is what it does. Oh, well, you're just mad because Cruz didn't win. No. It's not. This is not about Cruz suspending his campaign. This is not about Cruz not becoming the nominee. This is about our republic, which has been set ablaze and is being reduced to nothing but a pile of ashes that aren't even smoldering. And as soon as Trump or Hildebeest opens their gaping maws they call a mouth, gale force winds are just going to scatter it to the ends of the earth. It's just going to be gone. Yeah. All because these individuals want to negate and abandon their principles because they like the way that Trump makes them feel. What a bunch of crap.
Well, it also comes to the fact that they don't realize who they are. They've forgotten who they are deep down. That's why they're willing to sell their soul. It's because they don't value their soul. They don't care who they are. They just want instant gratification. You see, that's the major danger of turning to instant gratification. It blinds people. It turns us away from that which is truly important. And therefore, the penultimate begins to replace the ultimate. And in the United States, when it comes to our natural law, the things that matter, the United States being a nation of laws and not of men, having the rule of law, which has come under increasing attack, it requires that we understand who we are, that we have a firm, well-built and robust understanding of what it is that makes us unique, why we wanted to break away from Europe and to create this separate, sovereign, independent nation. And I know that that seems so abstract these days because it's not taught anymore. It's certainly not discussed by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media in any meaningful fashion anymore. And Donald J. Trump doesn't understand it. You know, it's as I've mentioned on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that how can Trump be, as the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media tries to claim, or attempts to claim, that he's a nationalist, leading a populist nationalist movement, how can he be a nationalist movement when he finds no inherent or intrinsic value in the very document that defines us both as a nation and as a people? Does that make any sense whatsoever? The answer is no, it does not. But that's the thing. This is the post-truth campaign. This 2016 presidential election cycle is the post-truth election cycle. We have two pathological liars who are going to be at the head of both of the mainstay political parties. This is the sort of factionalization that George Washington attempted to warn us about in his farewell address. We lose sight of the most important things, which in the United States is our Constitution, which lists our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. When we lose sight of that, when we forget just how important those rights are, when we become willing to cede those rights for a fleeting sense of security, it brings Benjamin Franklin's prophetic words back into the foreground. In other words, those who give up essential liberties for a fleeting sense of security deserve neither liberty nor security and shall surely have neither. That's where we are right now, folks. We either defend our rights, we either stand up for the Constitution, or we are there to lose them now and forevermore. That's why the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media was so happy to give Trump 3 times as much airtime as any of his competitors. Why? Because they see him as the thermonuclear option to destroy the gutless opposition party, or GOP, forever. And that is what they were gaming for. Why? Because they are adherents to a propagandistic agenda based on Fabianism. That's why we warn you about that, folks. That is a very real, substantial, significant, and open and obvious threat if you're willing to look at it in any objective form or fashion. That is the frame of mind that we have to have if we are going to bring this nation back from the brink of ruination.
There's another issue that people are still clinging to that is so illogically profound. It goes back to them. It always comes back to, yeah, but Trump. And now they're attaching, yeah, but Trump with, we have to defeat Hillary. We can't allow her to get in. Because if Hillary gets in, she's going to stack the Supreme Court. And imagine her having, putting 7 liberal justices on there and just, having her way to do everything. That's going to be detrimental. They can do that, then they can definitely come after your guns. Well, I'm sorry, but no, they can't. See, all this notion, this facade and charade and scenario that the Supreme Court has any relevance with this election at all is bovine excrement. Here's why. Because, as we mentioned before, the United States Supreme Court serves one purpose. One purpose. Well, actually 2 purposes, but they're actually one purpose and then a subset of that purpose. The main purpose is for them to interpret the laws that are made by our Congress to make sure that they hold validity with the Constitution. That is it. Their secondary purpose is to hold original jurisdiction at suits of law where a state is named as a party. That's it. Mm-hmm. Of course, they have appellate jurisdiction, too, as a third part. But that's further down the line. Their primary objective is to interpret the laws. And people have this asinine, twisted view of, well, no, their job's to interpret the Constitution. Wrong. The Constitution cannot be interpreted. Here's why. The Ninth Amendment prohibits it. Yep. The Constitution was already interpreted when the Founding Fathers and the framers of that document, that beloved, sacred document, when they gathered in that room in Independence Hall in squelching July heat. Actually, it began in May. And all the way through, they convened and stayed in there. With the clothes they wore, no air conditioning. They kept the windows shut because they did not want passersby to hear what was going on, because it could have been construed as an act of treason against the United States at that point.
Against the Articles of Confederation. Yep.
Correct. And they suffered all of that. That misery, the pain, the knockdown dragouts that occurred verbally, the debates, the threats of revolt. that came out of that. Every bit of it. They suffered through that because they saw something greater than themselves and this country at that time.
Yes, they saw the more perfect union that they were striving to create within the Constitution. Again, that's why the opening language to the preamble to the United States Constitution is such a clear and coherent thing. It is beautiful, poetic in its writing. And it also explains why our Constitution is the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running constitutional document in the entire course of human events.
Now, to go back...
It matters. It really matters. The reason it matters is that defines who we are as a nation and as a people. We have to stand up for these things. We have to defend these things because, like it or not, we are the ones that are called upon to do that. It is our duty, our obligation, and above all, our responsibility to do so. That is what our founding fathers called upon us to do. That is why this nation was founded the way that it was. It's why the founders went through all of that heartache, woe, and misery that Jeremy just mentioned there. It's because this country can be so much more. It can be so much more. The country, this republic, is greater than the sum of its parts. That's why that old adage has been oft times mentioned on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. This is an intrinsic part of our duty as sovereigns, and we've got to get back to it.
Well, I just for a moment, I want to go back to one of the points I was going to make with people saying we have to defeat Hillary because all of this could happen with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't mean anything in this election. That's propped up as a political football. Okay, the economy, another political football. People want to say, well, that's the issue. You know, everybody's suffering jobs. You know why people are suffering jobs? Because they've been educated to learn how to suffer jobs. They've been educated to not be self-sufficient, to not be able to negotiate for themselves, to say, this is what I'm worth. This is the kind of background I have. These are my skill sets. I'm looking to gain employment with you. It's bred laziness, complacency, ignorance, and stupefaction of the American people. It's all done by design. And therefore, they've been able to do this incrementally through the past 150 or 160 years. For what? So that they can have an opportunity, just as this election, which, Randy, I'm going to call this summer the summer of scams. That's what I'm going to name this. Last year you named last summer. I'm going to name this summer. I'm going to call it summer of scams.
Well,
because
it's the post-truth summer.
It's the post-truth summer, but I'm going to call it the summer of scams too. We use both, and here's why. Because we all know the history of that story, the summer of Sam, all the murders and so on and so forth. Well, that's what's happening. We, the people, are standing idly by, the vast majority of us are standing idly by and allowing these Fabians, these anti-American individuals, to murder us. Proverbially speaking, they are murdering the very thing that makes us what we are. And people say, well, you're talking about the Constitution. Yes, I am. Because, see, it is not a living document. However, to murder is to kill. Murder is the unlawful taking of a human life. And when the Constitution is directly responsible for our lives, liberties, and freedoms being ours, it cannot be given away without due process of law. The Constitution guarantees that. So our liberties are being murdered. They're being unlawfully taken from us without due process. We've seen numerous times, even with this convention, the rule of law they have violated. They violated the Constitution with this. His whole campaign has violated the Constitution. Why? Because he doesn't care. He sees no intrinsic value in it.
He never has.
He never has,
will.
and he never will.
And that's the problem that we have here. We've had so many charlatans just thrust upon us as somehow being these messianic figures that everyone's just attempting to find some way to relate to and to put them forth as the saviors of the nation. But again, it's as we've said before, you cannot just turn to a singular entity or individual to save the country, because if they claim to singularly have the power to save this country, isn't the contrapositive or the flip side of that coin that they also possess the sole amount of power to thereby disrupt, dismantle, and ultimately destroy this country? That's why our founding fathers had this notion of a separation of powers. Yes, the Barack Hussein Obama regime has done everything within its power to destroy that notion, to basically blur the lines of demarcation between the three separate branches of government. And that has led to a lot of the accelerated problems that we're experiencing in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And again, it shows no signs of getting better at any time in the foreseeable future. Why? Because people have become complacent. They didn't stand up when they had the opportunity to do so. We have got to become more proactive. We have got to realize that we are directly connected and involved with the way this government is to run and operate. That is the very way that our founding fathers designed this representative republic of ours to work. But you see that through incrementalization in education by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists has led us to this untenable, unacceptable position that we find ourselves as I sit here and speak into this microphone. The message that we need to convey, the message that we need to wholeheartedly embrace, is that it is our duty and our obligation to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, because we have to be the shepherds of it. You see, if you have a wolf in sheep's clothing that's trying to kill the sheep, who is the shepherd? We, the people, are the shepherd. We are the ones that are called upon to put an end to this once and for all. Now, I know that that's not an easy position to be placed in, but what is worth having ever comes easily? Nothing, truly. The things that matter most are those things that you must be willing to take a stance for, those things that you must be willing to fight and, if necessary, die for. Our founding fathers certainly were willing and able to do so. We need to be as hard-hearted as they were. We need to be as stalwart as they were, because, believe it or not, folks, they would have already been engaged 10 times over by this point. They would never have allowed it to go to the extent and to the great breadth that it has in this modern era.
Thomas Jefferson said it best. Because, see, when you talked about putting all of your hopes and aspirations and dreams and modicum of safety into one individual to do everything to save you as a messianic figure. And the flip side of that is, well, that person that one individual has the power, has the authority, has the wherewithal to do that. They also have the wherewithal to go and take everything away from you. That's called tyranny. And Thomas Jefferson said that all tyranny needs to gain a foothold in this country is for people of good conscience to remain silent. I'm going to go so far as to say that people who are supporting Trump are diehard Trump fans that are look to him as the golden coif, the messianic figure, the idol, the adulterous idol that he is, that they've created out of him, that he's actually created for himself, and everybody else just said, oh, that's fashionable, we like it, it's good, it's huge, it's bigly, yeah, we're going to do it. Every single one of those individuals are individuals that are not of good conscience. They're not remaining silent, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to force other people to remain silent. Every time I open my mouth to somebody who is pro-Trump and I give them the facts about his background, his agenda, the things that he said, his mannerisms, every caricature you could think of that applies to him, the only thing they can do is attack me and not the facts. Because they figure by attacking me, they remove me from the equation in the eye of the audience. Therefore, if I'm removed, automatically by proxy, my statements are removed. That's their insane logic. And I say it's insane because they do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The result that they expect of me, or that they expect, is for me to just shut my mouth and go away. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen.
And it's unrealistic. Everything that they come up with is unrealistic. Let's look at the summer of political correctness, or last summer, the way that they went after the Southern Cross battle flag, or the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia. They thought that they could use the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism to change the meaning of that flag, because there really was more than one meaning. And yes, it had been attempted to be co-opted by racist organizations, but that was not the original intent behind it. And they didn't care. They wanted to stereotype. Yet they are the ones that were sitting out there trying to attack stereotypical behavior, the ones that tried to say that that spoke against diversity. You see, there's another buzzword. This is the dark, twisted game of semantics that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists always engage in. It's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have so oft times warned you about the dangers of this game of semantics that they play. And what it comes down to is this. They see power and control in words. Remember the old adage that the pen is mightier than the sword? This is what it means. You can kill a man, but it is exceedingly more difficult to kill an ideology or an idea. And that's what they are trying to do. They are trying to police thought. They are trying to make certain forms of thought which is diametrically opposed to their own twisted and radical and sociopathic positions so that they can then be the only line of thought. Why? Again, because they know that their ideology cannot compete in a free marketplace of ideas. Because socialism is theft by any other name. That really, literally is what it is. It is theft by any other name. And of course, they are trying to double down on these efforts because they think that they are within an arm's length of achieving victory. And we've said that they've worked so meticulously for this for the past century and a half now, but it surely shows no signs of slowing down. Why? Because we have not been stepping up. We really have not, as a nation, been willing to stand shoulder to shoulder in staunch and fierce opposition to this hostile takeover of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours.
It's interesting that you mention that adage, the pen is mightier than the sword, and how you defined it, which is absolutely perfect. Because let's look at another ideology that is been attacked and has been classified as being dead, the Never Trump ideology. I'm sorry, but so long as there's a constitution, and so long as there's a breath in my body, Never Trump will always exist. Because Never Trump isn't about just Trump the individual. It's about everything that he embodies, everything that he believes, his whole agenda, his characteristics, everything that he believes, everything that he stands for, which is anti-American. It's anti-constitutional. So therefore, Paul Manafort has just been proven to be a liar and a fraud. Paul Manafort. That's what we're going to call him. Paul Manafort. Because guess what? You claim that the Never Trump movement is dead. It's been killed. Wrong. See, what you fail to realize, Paul Manafort, just like Randy said, you cannot kill an ideology so easily. What you mistake as being dead is nothing more than the ideology taking a step back, regrouping, and guess what? When it comes back in full force, because it hasn't gone away. See, this is all about strategy. It hasn't gone away. And proof of this is what Ted Cruz talked about in Cleveland, Ohio today at a rally prior to, the convention today. He even said it himself. He has said what we've been saying this whole time. Regarding unity, it's about unifying and uniting behind our principles. It is about we the people defending our Constitution and empowering ourselves with it. And guess what? People want to talk about, oh, well, this person has all the power. Hillary will have all the power if she's elected. She'll have the power with the Supreme Court, blah, blah, blah. You know what? That doesn't even hold a thimbleful of testicular sweat in the eyes of an individual who has the power of the United States Constitution, the knowledge of the United States Constitution, because that is power. Knowledge is power. Holding a position, an elected position, or having control or the ability to nominate and stack a court in your favor, that's not power. That's tyrannical shenanigans. That's what that is. That's not power. And could anybody please tell me one tyrannical regime that is still in existence today?
North Korea.
Well, I'm saying that is, has gone on in the way that of the Fabians.
North Korea. The reason I repeat that is it's been uninterrupted now since the 1950s. But no, it really wasn't the Fabian style because they did it immediately.
Right.
But if you look at communist China, they've had to back away from their communism. Yes. Even Vietnam has had to back away from their communism. The reason that they've had to do so is that these ideologies, when faced with real world situations, just cannot and do not ever work. It is a disaster waiting to happen. And the reason it's so disastrous is it does not take into account human nature. It does not take into account the characteristics that make us human. And to sit there and believe that political aspirations, political dreams, political goals are any different than standard greed in the private sector, that is just asinine. It's laughably naive. It's naivety on a biblical scale. You cannot believe that people do not lose their desire to have more, to have greater things. That was one of the greatest intellectual failings of Karl Marx, was he thought that once every nation on earth became communist, somehow this over-centralized government that was created in every nation would then simply wither on the vine, and everyone would sing and stand together, hand in hand, singing Kumbaya frickin' Ya, as if it would somehow bring this world together in harmony, and everyone would just be happy living in their slovenly misery. But again, it's not going to happen because human beings are tribal by nature. We are territorial by nature. And therefore, it would go against the very tribalism and territorial nature of humanity to sit there and think that the world is just going to sit there singing Kumbaya frickin' Ya in Red Disneyland. Well, Red Disneyland doesn't exist. It will never exist. And believe me, the so-called dictatorship of the proletariat would collapse too. Why? Because you can't get rid of greed. It is an essential part of being human. The only systems that really work is where you learn to harness greed to create something greater. And capitalism, free market capitalism, is the only system that's ever accomplished that. But if you look at the trade plans and agreements that the mafioso quafioso has set up, that's not based on free market capitalism. That's based off of protectionism, which is another strain of populism, which is just a strain for destroying freedom.
what I was referring to with a tyrannical regime, and it's my fault for not, simplifying it for myself. Sometimes I have to do that and have to sit back and break out the crayons and, kind of write it out.
Well, that's why the Crayola box has a little sharpener on the back,
yeah,
right?
Well, yeah. Well, mine has two. Just in
wow,
case,
that's the fancy one.
It's special. I could tell you it's bigly special. I like it. It's great. What I was driving at was, name one area or anywhere in this world where there was a tyrannical or a tyrant put in power and has still remained in power from the beginning of that, not a continuance of a previous tyrannical regime. I'm talking about the original tyrannical regime put in place and that tyrant still holding power. There isn't one.
No, the one that came closest would be Franco.
Yes. And look what happened to that. And how long was Franco?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. He was put in the 30s, and he died in what, 76, 77? Somewhere around there.
So let's say 40, 45, 50 years.
Yeah.
Around 50 years.
Okay.
Guess what? This further goes to show the awesome power of the United States Constitution and all of its knowledge contains within its four corners. 230, what, 235 years?
235 years.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Contiguous.
Mm-hmm.
Only changed by the purview of itself. Not changed by any other outside force or governmental influence. Only changed by the allowance of we the people. Name any other system of governance that has that much authority. And guess who that authority belongs to? We the people.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, that is power. And when we use that to empower ourselves and gain that knowledge, this is why other countries and other individuals and groups of people loathe us, despise us, hate us, and want to kill us. Because they are not willing to embrace that. Because it would completely undo the whole auspice of their existence.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that cannot be taken away. That is something that will never be taken away. That, my friends, is what makes this country great. And we can only have to strive to make America great again if that ever goes away. And you know what? I don't foresee that going away. In Ted Cruz's speech today, he even believes, he says he doesn't see it going away. In fact, he sees it getting stronger.
And it's because it's the will of the people. You have to realize just how powerful the true will of the American people is. You know, the one common denominator that has existed in any force that has ever stood in opposition to the United States of America, whether it be Great Britain in the time of our War of Independence or the Empire of Japan during the Second World War, they underestimated the incomparable and indomitable spirit of the American people. That we are able to face any obstacle, hurdle, and adversity that is ever placed in our path and able to overcome it. And we're able to do so because we are a freedom-loving nation, because we are based in those natural law tenets that are etched on our hearts by our Creator, the God of nature. That's why, going back to the Declaration of Independence, you find that Thomas Jefferson, who penned those poetic words, said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain fundamental and unalienable rights, that chief among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is quintessentially what it means to be an American citizen. That is what unifies us. It's not race, it's not blood, it's not language, it's our rights. And that is what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists and their allies in the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media really want. They don't want you to know that. They don't want you to think about that. That's why they use divisiveness. That's why they use the tried and true tactics and strategies of divide and conquer, pitting American citizen against American citizen. And they do this because to them that's ultimate power. The ultimate power is to deny our sovereignty, to deny our individualism, to strip and deprive us of all that makes us great. Well, we have got to stop that. The reason we have to stop that is we must maintain our vitality and viability as the great representative republic as our founding fathers intended, because that is the freest system on earth. That is why it is the longest contiguous running, constitutionally endowed representative republic in the entire course and scope of human events. And as Jeremy noted, that is not some small feat. That is an amazing thing that we have done, and it shows the infinite wisdom and foresight possessed by our founding fathers, who truly were prodigies and geniuses of their age. They gave us this. And yet we want to back away from that? We want to tear this apart? We want to hand the reins of political power to an out-of-control, frothing at the mouth hairpiece? No, that does not work.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Remember at the onset of the show, I equated truth as being an absolute. Well, truths, meaning that those are the absolutes. Life is an absolute. Liberty is an absolute. Pursuit of happiness, which translates into property, is an absolute. It's self-evident. When he said that it was self-evident, that means that it was recognized by the individual that life is an absolute necessity. Liberty can only be achieved because of the preservation of life. And you cannot obtain property without being able to achieve liberty. Thus, negating life would wipe all of that out. It is self-evident. It means that people, as an individual, recognize that. Not only recognized it, but embraced it. And took responsibility for it. Those are the absolutes that make us the sovereign, ultimate wielders of sovereignty. The individuals of this country, this great republic. And when people don't want to adhere to the absolutes, and they don't want to hear the truth or embrace the truth, again going back to the biblical passages of the truth shall set you free, these individuals, they've made the choice, when they abandon those absolutes, they are enslaving themselves. They are throwing themselves into slavery. Because you are not free at that point. They have become a slave to this propagandistic machine known as the Trump train. They're on there shoveling coal as hard and as fast as they can, and you know what? If one of them happens to pass out, or fall over dead, another person will gladly grab that shovel, say that 20 times real fast, and pick up where that individual left off. Why? Because they're conditioned to do that. They've allowed themselves to become a slave to an ideology, a slave to an agenda, and a slave to their own ignorance.
And it goes to a deep division that has been brewing in the hearts of those who are either the detente members of the gutless opposition party or the Fabian socialists who have taken over the Democrat Party. The whole idea is to tear us apart. And why? Why? Again, it speaks to that character that Jeremy was just mentioning there, of those waves of people ready to come up and to defend all that we are, both as a nation and as a people, selflessly dedicated to the continuation of this ideal and experiment of a representative Republican form of government that our founding fathers conjured up 235 to almost 236 years ago. Think of how special that is, folks. Think of how special it is that we still have that common string, that common denominator of unity. This is why we say that a tyranny of false unity is so disingenuous and so dangerous. That's why we take exception to what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists are claiming, and for what the Lion Branch Trumpidians are trying to force upon the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. It's because they want to distract us from the ultimate things. And you see, power, it rests with us. That is the whole dignity of the United States of America. That is why Jeremy and I come to these microphones and produce these shows for you. Folks, we do this for you, not to stroke our own egos, not to have some inflated sense of self-worth. No, we do this to empower you, the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. In so doing, we can come together standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity and let those tyrants and those wannabe potentates know that they cannot irreparably, fundamentally transform the United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed representative republic to some sort of twisted Fabian socialist dystopia nightmare. Because they literally are trying to destroy that which matters. And it must stop.
Again, madness. That's truly what this is. It's madness. Randy, for the life of me, I cannot understand why any individual would be so willing to forfeit and abandon the very thing that allows them to even think about doing that. It's beyond mind-blowing, is what it is. I just can't understand it. I mean, this is not the country that we grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Even though growing up, the country wasn't all that great. We just were too young to understand it fully. And even now we don't understand it fully, and nobody could understand it fully. That's why we have to continue to educate ourselves. We have to continue to empower ourselves with the knowledge of the Constitution. Stay vigilant in studying it, and applying it, and defending it. Not for ourselves, because it's greater than us. It's greater than us. We have to do this for our posterity, because if we don't do it to where we have a fluent working in understanding and knowledge of this, then how are we going to be able to teach our offspring? What are we going to have to pass on to our future generations to keep this country moving in perpetuity of what the founding fathers envisioned it for? See, we're no good to anybody else. We're no good to future generations if we don't take care of ourselves.
That's true. And we have to be so proactive with our rights, because these nefarious forces will stop at nothing to strip and tear them away from us. That's why they've been working towards it now for as long as they have, and they won't back down. And it was really kind of frightening what we're seeing here. It is frightening. And the reason we say that is so many people are just willing to give it all up. For what? This fleeting sense of security. And it's so contrary to who we are.
You know, again, it's beyond depressing. It's beyond disappointing. It's beyond disgusting. I'm going to tell you right now, it will stop. It will stop. Not because we want it to, but because it has to. There is no other choice. We've been placed on a one-track mission to making sure that our republic remains what it was intended for. Its true intentions, its foundational intentions. We've always been on that track.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems that people have always wanted to take, pit stops, split rails here and then try to get back onto that track. That's why we gave the history of the Republican presidents who go all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. We could have gone all the way back to John Adams, even though there wasn't Republicans back then, but it was still the ideology that many of them embraced. And even with John Adams,
Alien Sedition Act,
all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, there is no such thing as a perfect president or a perfect candidate. It's just not there. But there is such thing as a more perfect union and a more perfect rule of law that is all rooted within the confines of our shared Constitution. And when we have a candidate or a president that adheres to it in a strict fashion, understands it, has a fluid and working knowledge of it, will not deviate from it. And if he or she does deviate from it, they have the wherewithal and they have the responsibility and they have the understanding that they will be held accountable for doing such. And they would be willing to be held accountable. That's part of the other problem. Everybody else wants to pass the buck to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to take personal responsibility for their own actions or lack thereof. Randy, even we're guilty with that to a certain degree. Because we're not perfect.
Right.
But here's the thing. We're willing to take responsibility for our actions.
Of course.
And that's what sets us apart from those reprobates and house spawns of Satan that lack a good conscience, that will throw everything aside that is right and just to latch on to some meaningless charade that is spewed like someone just turned, hooked the faucet up to somebody's bowels and turned it on full force, called the mouth of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
That Carnival Barker.
He really is.
For what? For what? Why? Because
showy, flashy, feel
showy,
good.
flashy. Well, because their feelings were hurt, because they're angry, because the people they put in the office didn't do what they said. Well, you know what? You don't burn down the house because you have a couple of people inside that don't do what they're supposed to do. You kick the individuals that are inside out. Otherwise, you don't have a house left.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going on here. They're willing to burn everything down. Everything. See, they want to accuse us as being the ones to burn down the country because we won't support Trump. No, that's ass backwards. What it is they're the ones who have set the fires and they're fanning the flames. Again, this is all projection. This is labeling. This is all propaganda 101.
Yes.
You individuals that have supported Trump, you individuals that have not been willing to be held accountable for your actions, or willing to hold him accountable for his violations of the Constitution, for his violations of law, and for his actions, you want to embrace them, that makes you accomplices. That makes you the ones that are at fault for what is coming down the pipe. Not us. We warned you about this.
and we will continue to do so because we find that to be our duty, our obligation, and above all, our responsibility. We love the United States of America. We love what the United States of America has always stood for and represents. And that makes it all the more difficult for what we are facing here, because we know the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists will stop at nothing to completely obliterate and annihilate the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people. Again, that is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are so dedicated to empowering you. That's the whole impetus behind us going forth and speaking into these microphones, preparing these programs for you. It is to empower you so that you can stand up and reiterate that most powerful two-letter, one-syllable word of the English lexicon. No.
No.
No, you cannot fundamentally alter this country. No, you cannot fundamentally transform us away from a constitutionally endowed representative republic to some twisted Fabian socialist nightmare. That is what we are here for. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Folks, we guarantee you she's not going to do a voice call for your alcohol. She's just going to pour it for you. And if she tries any shenanigans, just push her out of the airplane. As always, folks, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I've been joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. We want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. On top of that, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please voice them either here on our YouTube page, our Facebook page, or our Google Plus page. On top of that, we invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX, and there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, our Blogspot page, which lists audio blogs and all sorts of other useful information to empower yourself with, and then there is the Cafe Press account. Tell them a little bit about what's there, Jeremy.
Well, folks, we have a bunch of apparel, swag, as I guess the millennials call it now, and t-shirts, hats, and I guarantee you, folks, they do not say "Make America Great Again." They have something much, much better. Our first-class passenger logos and our original Wright Flyer Aviation Excellence logo on it. Show them off for yourself. Show them off to your friends. Make your friends jealous and make them feel greedy to where they want to buy one. After all,
Yeah.
you know, it would just fuel their capitalistic desire in nature and make you feel good about themselves. It'd make you feel good for making someone else feel greedy about capitalism. So that's always a plus.
Yeah. With that in mind, folks, we thank you once again for tuning in. We will see you next time. Do take care.